Welcome. My name is Ryan Jones, one of the application engineers here at Unitronics. Today we'll be talking about trends on our enhanced series controllers as well as the SD trends. Like I said, the enhanced series controllers includes the V350, the V560, V570, V1040, and the V1210. On these controllers you can have 8 separate trend graphs per application. On each graph, we can show 8 different curves at the same time. On the V130, we can have 4 different trends per application with 2 curves on each. To set up the trends, it's very simple. It is all done within VisiLogic. On the left-hand side of VisiLogic, you'll see what we call the Project Explorer window. You'll see there is an expandable option called Trends. When you expand it out, the first topic you'll see is the individual trends. This is going to be the graph we're actually going to draw on the screen, or our plotting area. If you right-click on it, you'll be able to change the name. You can change the sampling interval. This is going to be how frequently it is updating the graph with new data. You can set the number of history samples. There's a minimum of 50 samples and a maximum of 32,000. For the entire application, we can only have a maximum of 32,000 data points for all trends. So you need to divvy that up amongst all your trends. If you want to have more of a history on one, you can give it more samples and less on another. But just remember that you have a total of 32,000 to play with. Then lastly, we have a run stop bit. This is going to be if the trend is actually recording or not. You need to set this bit for the trend to run. If you want the trend to always be active, you can just give this bit a power-up condition of set, and your trend will always be operating. Expanding that out, we now have the curves. These are going to be the 8 different curves that are going to be included in that trend. If you expand it, you'll see we can give it a name, either a static text like I've done here, curve 1, or we can assign it a string from our string library. We need to assign it to an MI. This is going to be where it is pulling the information from. And I can assign the Ymin and Ymax value. We can assign a decimal format, so when it is on our HMI screen, we'll see on the y-axis 0 to 100. If I wanted this instead to be 0 to 10.0, I could do that by changing the decimal format. To add the trend to our HMI screen, it's very simple. On our quick launch bar under Graph, you will see the trends icon. And all we need to do is click and drag where we want it on our HMI screen. Note that the element has to be at least 200 by 140 pixels. When you are sizing the element, you will get a warning if it is too narrow or too wide or not tall enough. When it is the appropriate size or large enough to fit on the screen, you will see the image like this, and you can add it to your HMI. Now the built-in trends are just for a live real-time view. The data samples are a FIFO system, meaning that once you have reached your maximum number of data samples, the oldest information or the first information in is deleted, is the first out. So it only retains the most recent information. As well, that information is not able to be withdrawn back from the controller. We will not be able to, say, go back an hour and see what the value of a curve was. The only information that is stored on the controller that is accessible is the current values. If you do want to have the ability to pull up these trends after they've been created, or if you want to export them from the controller, we offer our SD trends. Using the SD card, we can save trends from the controller. We can open them with SD card manager, or we can export them to an Excel spreadsheet. these trends are saved in what's called UTR format. But like I said, using our software, we can also convert that to an Excel. We have the option to append a trend file or to overwrite it. Every time we start and stop the trend, which you will see in a moment, we have the option of deleting what information was there before and overwriting it, or we can simply add a new segment onto the existing file. Of course, like all our SD tools, the SD card must be formatted properly first using our SD card suite. Using the SD trends is very straightforward. We merely need to tell the controller when we are starting to record using the start trend function block. We will assign a file name for our trend. We will assign which trend we want to record. And then we merely just pulse the function block. When we are done recording, or if we want to stop the trend to start a new segment, we use the stop trend function block. Now we have a couple of useful system bits when dealing with SD trends. The first is system bit 116. This is how we determine if we are going to overwrite the UTR file or if we're going to append to the UTR file. If system 116 is set, we will overwrite, and if it is reset, we will append. When we are viewing the trend, recalling a trend on the HMI screen, we have the option to jump back segments. Segments are whenever we hit the stop and start on a new append, we will create a new segment. If we want to jump between segments on the HMI screen, we can use system bits 117 or 118. These are commonly linked to just push buttons on our HMI screen or on our controller. And then lastly, we have system bit 119. This lets us know if the system is busy. For example, we cannot do a jump if the controller is currently processing a jump. So we can use the busy bit to make sure that the system is ready. We can export our SD trend from the controller and put it into SD card manager. This will allow us to view any portion of the trend that we've recorded at any time. We can replay the trend. You'll see in a moment we can take a look at the individual appends, and of course we can export to Excel. We'll do an example of that in just a moment. So let's go ahead and take a look at VisiLogic. Now I've gone ahead and already created some sample data, which I have in a subroutine here. And I'm going to plot the results of those on my trend. First thing I do is I right-click on the trend to assign the properties of the graph. I gave it a name. I changed the sampling interval. I gave it a predetermined number of history samples, so it's going to just hold in its memory 1,000 different points. I assigned it a run stop bit, which I just gave a power up value of set, so my trend will always be running. And then I assign my curves. I gave them each a name. I linked them to their corresponding values or operands, and I gave them their min-max values. Two of my curves are going to be on the same scale. They're both going to be a value between 0 and 100. However, my third value is going to be from -100 to 100. And you'll see why in just a moment. So now I'll add the trend to my screen just by clicking the trend HMI element. You'll notice it's going to warn me if it's not the proper size. As soon as it reaches the acceptable size, it appears correctly. Here we can select some of the properties for our trend. This will affect how it is displayed on our screen. of course, and wants to know which trend I want to show. I'm going to show my webinar trend. I can change any of the colors if I prefer. I can change the number of points to display from the rightmost point to the leftmost point. I can change the ticks. I can change the date format. And I can change the history scroll mode. When our trend is running, we have the option of pausing it to go into history mode, where we can then page back to see data that's already gone by. When we press the back button, we can either go back a full screen, quarter screen, half screen, or 3/4 of a screen. This box here merely just connects the dots to make a nice smooth curve. And you'll notice the OK button is grayed out because we are still missing one thing. We need to assign a link to our curve. And this is going to be the current curve. When the curves are being displayed on screen, you'll notice right now in the preview here, it's showing curve 1, the red curve, and the axis is corresponding to that. So we will see the Y max and the Y min for that curve. Just by tapping on the screen, we can flip between the curves and see the corresponding Y min and Y max for those. So we just have to link it here, and by making sure this box is checked, we'll be able to select between the three curves merely by touching on the screen. Now I already have it downloaded to my controller, so I'll just go online here and show you what it looks like when it's running. All right, so here's my trend. That's running on my controller. You'll see it's currently in run mode. It has a timestamp for the most recent data that's been entered, and I can see the last data as well that I can see on the screen. There are two buttons on the side, M and G. M is for mode. By clicking it, we are now in history mode, where I can use the buttons here to page back and see some previous recordings. G is for gradient lines. Make it a little easier to see what the values are. To go back into run mode, I merely hit the M again. So you'll notice we're looking at curve 1 here, which has a range of 0 to 100. Curve 2, same 0 to 100. And curve 3 is now at negative 100 to 100. If you wanted to, for example, measure RPMs versus temperature, RPMs could be in the thousands or tens of thousands, and temperature can only vary by in the tens of degrees. If we directly compare the two on the same scale, they're basically going to look like straight lines from each other, and they're going to be very hard to relate. By keeping them on their own scales and superimposing them on top of each other, it's very easy to see the relation between them. If you do want everything to be on the same scale in your program, that is not a problem at all. Just make sure you set the Y min and Y max to the same values for all your curves, and they will be to scale. All right, now we're going to add the SD trend to our program. The first thing I need to do is create a file name for this trend. So when I save it to the SD card, it has a name. I'm going to get this under SD. First I'm going to do strings and string to ASCII. I can just type in what I want for my file name. I'm just going to use trend, and I can assign an MI vector to save this trend in. We're not going to use an offset for this example, so let's leave that at 0. So it's going to convert trend to ASCII format for me, and it's going to save it into MI100, so I can then use it as my file name. The file name has to be 8 characters, and it has to be alphanumeric. All right, now that I have a file name, I can use the start and stop trend function blocks. So I have a button already created on my HMI screen. So I'm going to use a positive transition of the user pressing that button to initiate the start trend, which is under, of course, SD trend utilities, start saving trend to SD. It's going to ask us for some very basic information. Which trend do I want to record? I want to record webinar trend. What file do I want to save it to? You have 4 folders that you can save into, trends 1, 2, and 3, and 4. They asked me what the file name is, which we of course have just created, and we saved into MI100. We have a status message in case anything goes wrong, and we'll have a memory bit to let us know if the function is in progress. So that will start my trend and begin recording all the real-time information onto the SD card. When I want to stop the trend, do the same thing again. I'll just have a button on my HMI. Linked to the stop trend function block. And it's that simple. We have one to record and one to stop recording. Remember, if you are appending, every time you stop the trend and start again, you will create a new segment, but it will all still be the same file. It will all be contained in the same UTR file. If you have it set to overwrite, every time you stop and start again, you will overwrite the previous UTR file. When you are retrieving the trends from the SD card to show on your HMI screen, I mentioned before we have some system bits that will allow us to jump between segments. I'll show you how to add that to our ladder real quick. Of course, since it's on a button, first thing I do is I grab a positive transition. This is a HMI button that I created previously. I'm going to make sure that the function is not currently in progress, or the draw is not currently in progress, by using system bit 119. And then I will set system bit 118, jump to previous segment. Note, I am setting it here. The OS is going to reset it for me as soon as it completes, so I don't have to worry about resetting it. And I'll do the same below it for the jump to next segment. Positive transition of the button. Make sure the system is not currently busy. And I jump to previous segment. Oops. 117. Now I can use memory bit 8 and memory bit 9 in my program to jump back and forth between segments. To view an SD trend from the HMI screen, it's very simple. We're going to do the same thing we did for the normal trend, except we're going to use the trend from SD HMI tool. Again, we're going to have to click and draw it out on the screen, making sure it's large enough to fit. Notice this window is very familiar, except with this added bit at the top. We have to tell it what the file name is, which we stored in MI100. We will have an error bit if anything goes wrong. I stored it into trends1. And the rest is everything that we did before with the regular trend. Conforming the colors, changing the points to display, ticks, etc. Same features we saw before. Of course, we have to add our current curve, MI. One thing also I didn't show you before is we have a tab for both trend windows called curves. This is where we can change the color of each curve. As well, we can set a bit to hide the curve. For example, if I have 3 curves on my screen like I do, and I only want to look at one of them, I can hide the other 2 by setting their hide bits. That's pretty much it for ladder. Now I'll show you what it looks like in SD card manager. And so I have taken the SD card out of my PLC, and I've put it into my laptop. The first thing you do whenever you're in SD card manager, by the way, SD card manager is a portion of our SD card suite, which you can download from our website. The first thing I do once opening SD card manager is I create a new project. I've named it Trends Webinar. And then I import the SD folder. Oops. There we go. There it is. Once I've selected the SD card on my computer, I can import it, and it'll show up here just as it appears on the SD card itself. It is under the Trends folder. It's in the Trends1 subfolder, and I called it Trend Log. Every time I did an append, you'll notice it added these part. This will be each of the appends. I can click on them to go back and see the different segments. I have the option to view the trend in either 2D mode or 3D mode. There we go. We have the option of setting the angle at which we're viewing it at, give it a more dynamic look. We can go to any individual page. I left this recording overnight, so it's recorded 6,600 pages. The number of data you can record onto the SD card is only limited by the size of your SD card. Currently, our maximum SD card size is 32 gigabytes. So you're not confined to the same 32,000 bits or points, rather, that we do for the trends. It's only limited by the size of your card. I can also play the trend, see it in real time, or what it would look like. And I can export it to Excel. So I've exported all my data points here to an Excel spreadsheet. You'll see the curve 1 values, curve 2, and curve 3, as well as what time they were recorded. And I've gone ahead and made a simple graph using that data. So that's it. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. This is a great way to monitor data as well as do data logging at the same time. Very useful information. And once it's in Excel, of course,